Hello everyone, this is Rick and welcome to Astral Club. The topic for this talk is going to be mental health and astral projection. Before I get into it, just want to mention Patreon. If you'd like to support the work of Astral Club, spreading information about astral projection, out of the body experience, you can do so on Patreon. You get advanced episodes on Sunday, a library of downloaded episodes for your podcast app, and a Patreon email where we can talk back and forth and you can ask questions. And if you're interested, that link will be in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like to have a lesson with me to learn to astral project, more than glad to work with you. I find that these lessons, the private lessons, work very well. People are in a safe environment and they can share their true concerns and fears and desires. And it's something that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable doing in a public forum or in a comments section on a YouTube video. If you'd like information on private lessons, you'll find an email where you can request further information. Let's get started here. I want to discuss, I found an article in by the National Institute of Health, NIH. And it was printed in 1921. What am I talking about? It was made in 2021. Sorry. That's 2021, people. It has a very particular take on astral projection, i.e. out-of-the-body experiences. And I think it's very necessary to understand astral projection, out-of-the-body experiences, and how they might be interpreted by a mental health professional. Before I get into this, I want to do a disclaimer here. I am not a medical professional. As such, nothing I say here should be interpreted as a medical diagnosis or medical treatment or advice of any kind. Perhaps the diagnosis of this particular patient's condition that we'll be discussing in a minute is proper and warranted. Instead, I'm merely suggesting that as a layman, I could see how such a diagnosis of a problem with astral projection, i.e. out-of-the-body experiences, that this has the potential of being too broadly applied to encompass all astral projectors. Number two, worldview. It's important to understand that psychiatric professionals in surveys have reported the lowest degree of belief in religion and survival after death than any other medical professional. And medical professionals in general have a lower belief in survival after death than the population at large. The reason this is important to discuss is that they are much more likely, these psychiatrists and psychologists, to diagnose an out-of-the-body experience or even a near-death experience in terms of a medical illness requiring treatment rather than a legitimate spiritual experience. Remember, they're coming at this from a standpoint that once the physical body dies, that's it. Extinction. No more awareness. Therefore, any delusion that you might have of awareness outside your physical body must be, by definition, hallucinatory, not real. So I just wanted to get those things out of the way before I get into the actual article. The title of this article, and it was published by the National Library of Medicine and the National Center for Biotechnology Information, and it was published August 9th, 2021. And it was entitled Astral Projection, a Strange Out-of-the-Body Experience in Dissociative Disorder. Out of the body experiences, and this is coming right from their own abstract, out of the body experiences, OBEs, are hallucinatory visual experiences that involve seeing the physical body placed in an external visual space. So what they're saying right off the bat is it's hallucinatory. So it's not real. And they're just defining for the physicians reading this of exactly what they're talking about. They go on to say many psychiatric disorders, including brain dysfunctions, pharmacological agents, and altered psychological states, are reportedly associated with these phenomena. OBEs have been linked to various brain lesions, particularly in the parietal and temporal regions, psychiatric disorders, severe emotional states like a near-death experience, substance use, i.e. taking drugs, migraine, and epilepsy, but very few have been reported in dissociative identity disorder, which I think is obviously their main point here in drawing attention to this particular case and in this article. So we're dealing with, in this report, they present the case of a 15-year-old male patient. And this 15-year-old male was of the urban middle class in India, which is the reason why he's seeing a medical professional, because certainly a poor Indian wouldn't have the money to spend getting therapy for his disorder, if you will. So this 15-year-old male patient described a strange experience where he found himself to be floating outside his own body while he visualized his own body from a third-person perspective. So he got out of his body and he's looking at his body lying on the bed. On further evaluation, a diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder and dissociative fugue was formulated. From my layman's terms, what they're talking about here is a disorder where you are no longer associating your consciousness with your physical body, which is where it belongs. So that's why you are disassociating. You are believing that you've got this consciousness outside of your physical body. On further evaluation, like I said, they made this particular diagnosis. The patient showed improvement after undergoing abreaction therapy. Abreaction therapy it's a process by which repressed material, particularly a painful experience or conflict, is brought back to consciousness. The person not only recalls, but also relieves the material, which is accompanied by an appropriate emotional response. It is the most useful in acute neurotic conditions caused by extreme stress, PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, experienced by a number of people, including soldiers who undergo a lot of trauma during battle, hysteria, etc. So that is abreaction therapy. So one of the reasons they did this therapy on this young man is they believe that one of the sources, if not the source, of these strange experiences he was having, disassociating from his physical body, seeing himself outside of himself, is that he had repressed trauma. And this trauma was coming out in this psychiatric illness. Now, one of the reasons why as a layman, I couldn't possibly say whether the diagnosis was right or wrong, but he did have problems. His mother left when he was very young. His father beat him severely. He ran away from home on 3 different occasions and lied about his age to get jobs and what have you. But eventually he was always found and brought back. So this young man has undergone trauma. And I think an abreaction therapy like this might be helpful to him. Not for what they think, not to get rid of his astral projections, but to work through perhaps trauma he's still carrying from this awful father, and these running away episodes. So, I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with this therapy, as far as working through some of his trauma. So to recap, they diagnosed him after hearing about his astral projection with a dissociative disorder. So they gave him the abreaction therapy. They also conducted hypnosis and relaxation training along with supportive psychotherapy, all of which I think would probably help a young man who went through some of this abuse. I don't know if it's going to get rid of his projections, but we'll see in a minute. Dissociative disorders occur due to an internal conflict between the ego and the self. When a person is unable to successfully repress a traumatic experience, or when a repressed memory experience comes out of the cocooned barrier, leading to an altered state of perception and self-experience, which is described by a patient or by the patient as an OBE. The OBE presents a scarce differential in the context of psychiatric illness, which might be helpful in the formulation of approaches toward management in cases of such OBE, making it a strange yet intriguing addition to the literature. So one of the first things they did once they heard his experience about what he basically did was he left his body and he spent about 10 or 15 minutes hovering in the room, staring down at his body, which is a very common experience for new projectors. What surprises me is that he was able to stay out of his body for as long as he did, just doing nothing but hovering there so close to the body and staring at the body. I mean, those are two things that I normally recommend you do not do. Remember my, get out and get the hell out approach? Leave your body and then get out. You're outside your home as quickly as possible. Get as far away from your physical body as you can. But that's really all we're talking about here, outside of the abuse he suffered as a child. And I'm sure he probably has some repressed memories. But what they're saying here, it seems to me, is that they believe that this therapy is going to assist him in uncovering trauma that he has buried, which they believe is causing these unusual disassociations from his physical body. They believe that with this therapy, he'll be able to work through the trauma. Usually what's going to happen is you're going to relive it to a certain extent and work through it, put it into context, and start to heal from it. And I think they believe that this would go a long way to eliminating these odd OBEs that are occurring, which, of course, they're seen as nothing more than a symptom of a mental disease. Now, apparently they performed quite a bit of tests on him. His medical history was negative for symptoms of epilepsy, migraine, cerebrovascular accident. In other words, some sort of an accident that would have affected the blood going through his brain. Neurological deficit. He didn't have a problem with, his ability to think. And there was no history of episodes of hyperpyrexia. Hyperpyrexia just means a very high body temperature of 106.7 or above Fahrenheit and 41.5 or 41.5 Celsius. And yes, if you, as an adult you have temperature that high, you probably will hallucinate, and it may damage your brain. So, but the bottom line is they did all these tests, they did his back history, and they couldn't find any of these possible physical problems that might have led to what they consider this delusional experience. Now, other things they mentioned, just to be complete here is apparently he had a lisp to him. He also had some conduct disorders in school. He bullied younger children. He threatened them. He was deceitful. He lied. I don't know why they had two of those words there. It's pretty much the same thing. Anyway, he manipulated people. He was truant from school. He stayed outside beyond the home curfew. Okay, I mean, so he got in a little bit of trouble in school, but I don't see anything there in my layman's, that would point to some severe mental disorder. Chances are he was bullied at home by his father, and then he took it out in school. I don't know that you need to be a psychiatrist to figure that particular one out. But, I mean, so what I'm saying is they're being thorough. They did a complete background on him here. I'm not going into, they go into a whole explanation of exactly what astral projection is and how it works and all the rest of that. Look, you guys know that. I'm not going to sit there because they wrote this for somebody who's never heard of it. And you guys have heard of it. So I'm not going to go through all of this. They did EEGs on him, and that was normal. They did a CT scan of his brain, and that didn't show any pathological findings. So, I mean, they really did a complete workup on this kid. They also put him through some various tests that tested his psyche and his intelligence and whatever. And everything came out really normal with no particular depressive or anxiety or psychotic features at all. So he was a bit of a bully in school. And like I said, it's not surprising. He understood violence from his father. So what did they do for him? Well, I already talked about the therapy, which I don't think would hurt really almost anyone. We probably all have some traumas to one degree or another we could probably work through and help feel better. But this becomes my problem. They prescribed Lexapro for him, which is an SSRI, which is an antidepressant, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, for those who would like it defined. And also they gave him Klonopin, which is a sedative, and it also helps with people with panic disorders, for instance. So this is my real problem when they started giving him medication, which he might be on for the rest of his life, and now he's got a dissociative disorder. I can tell you right now with a medical record like that, you'd never get into the U.S. military. That's for darn sure. And he sure as heck wouldn't be able to get a top secret clearance like I had with that kind of thing. I remember when I filled out my application, they were very in depth. They don't only ask about my history, they ask about all my relatives going back to my grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever, and if there was any history of mental illness. So, this 15-year-old kid, I don't know if he'd ever want to join the military or whatever. And I don't know what Indian military standards are, but I know he'll never go in the U.S. military, and he'll never get any kind of a secret classification, much less top secret. And he might be on these drugs for the rest of his life, and quite frankly, it could have been worse. Because they might have given him Haldol, for his problems. And that drug, for instance, has very severe side effects at times. So that was how this paper discussed for the mental health community, published in 2021, how to look at astral projection or out-of-the-body experiences. Now, I cannot advise you, because I'm not qualified, as to what type of mental health help you might require. That is not I don't have the capability. That's a decision that you're going to have to make. However, I would be aware that there are studies like this out there being read by psychiatrists and psychologists, people who do not believe in survival after death. Therefore, there's no room for the reality of an out-of-the-body experience or astral projection. So they've got to diagnose it as some sort of a mental illness. And don't be surprised if you get saddled with a dissociative personality disorder. Now, look, if you believe the experiences that you're having are the result of severe trauma that you experienced in your life, that's something different. You might need professional help there, and that's something that you would need to consider. But if you don't have a history of severe trauma or PTSD, for instance, and you're leading a normal life with normal relationships and being a producing member of society who doesn't have any drug abuse problems or anything, then I would think very carefully before seeking out medical advice as to your out-of-the-body experiences, because you might end up seeing someone with a psychiatrist on their door, and you might end up with a handful of prescriptions. But there we are. That's the current mental health perspective on out-of-the-body experiences and astral projection. If you found that long, boring dissertation at all helpful, hit the like button, share it with those of like minds, subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you're tuned in for the Wednesday afternoon and Saturday morning episodes when they are published. And as always, questions and comments. Have you ever experienced or had astral projections and you were worried about your mental health? Did you share it with anyone? Did you share it with a physician? If so, what was his or her reaction? I'd love to know. Any questions you have or anything you'd like to offer, love to hear it. And as always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.